Hey guys, so I decided to do a live today because today is actually the 14th year anniversary of Dead Silence. If you guys don't know what the movie is, it's totally fine because I'm actually just about to explain it. I'm going to show you a picture of one of the posters first because you guys probably don't know what it looks like or never heard of the movie because it's a really old movie and it wasn't really that known either. Like, I'll talk to people about it and they'll not know what it is about. So I actually have this picture of the thing. Oh my god. If my camera actually lets me. So that is the poster to the movie. Sorry, is my background to the camera. I mean, my laptop is showing, but yeah, anyways. So that is the poster to the movie, and basically I'm going to tell you guys what the movie is about and why I decided to do the live today. So, I'm going to start with the live part, like why I decided to do the live. So, when I was 4, you guys probably know this, but I know some people don't watch these, and whoever decides to watch these can, what's it called? Like, are going to know. So, when I was 4, I used to have a lot of bad dreams, and did not know why I was having these bad dreams, but it was apparently about this. So, yeah. It was about that. And if you see the movie, or if you've ever heard of it, it's not something a little kid should watch. I believe that. It's very traumatizing. How I got through it, I don't know. But also, okay, so now the reason why, like I already told you guys, why it's so special to me, but now I am going to explain the movie because I feel because people don't know about it, they need to. So basically, Dead Silence is about, like, it starts off with basically some words that just say, like, where the word ventriloquist means, like, where it came from. So, it tells you where it came from, and then you start seeing, like, while the credits are going, basically a doll being made, a ventriloquist doll being made, and which is actually the one right here, which his name is Billy. So you see Billy actually being made while the credits are rolling, and then when he's done, the movie starts off with a young couple who are like in their late 20s, early 30s, and while they're just having a normal day at home, the husband's fixing he's fixing the sink, and the wife is just clowning on him because he has been taking hours to do it. And by then it was already getting time for dinner. So she tells him, like, okay, you need to stop this and just go get us something to eat. So he ends up stopping. And while they're talking, they get a knock at the door. Don't know who it is at the door. So they're like, what the heck? The husband, which is named Jamie, he opens the door and starts to tell, and doesn't see anybody at first, actually. He doesn't see anybody at first, and then basically he brings the package in because it's like a really huge box, and it just has his name on it. So he brings it in, the wife's asking him, which her name is Lisa. Lisa starts to ask him, like, what, like, who was it from? He's saying, I don't know who it's from, like, it has no note, no card, no nothing, it just doesn't even have an address, it really doesn't. And then, so they're like, you know what, let's open it. So they decide to open it, and that's when they find Billy inside this, like, old kind of trunk thing. It's like he was placed into a trunk and just wrapped. And they thought it was, like, a little funny at first, like, the wife starts to make a joke about how he adopted a baby for them. They did not. He's like, what the heck? No, he did not. And then she's like, well, who would send you this? He's like, I don't know. They're looking around, seeing if the paper, like, in the inside or in the trunk, if there's anything that, like, says why he had did this, like, why this was sent to him, which there was no reason. So it skips to now Jamie going to go get dinner for him and his wife. And while he's going to get dinner, Lisa is wanting to pull a prank on him using Billy. So she puts Billy in one of the guest bedrooms and puts him under a blanket and while she is, she just starts hearing like little laughter, like if a child's laughing. And if you've seen the movie, it's Billy. So, and or his ventriloquist, which is Mary Shaw. And so basically, she is like, what the heck is going on? Everything in the house is stopping. They had the radio on. It's like kind of, I don't know how to say the word, this thing like distorting. So they are basically like, she's just like, what the heck is going on and stuff. Then out of nowhere, she again hears the laughing again and goes to see, like, is she like really hearing it from Billy? So when she hears it from Billy, she, like, out of nowhere, just like the blanket gets thrown on her and Billy's kind of attacking her. So she kind of throws her across the room, which he ends up, when he throws her across the room, he ends up throwing her out of the room. So he is basically, like, she's vomiting blood at this point. It's really disgusting. This movie's a little too disturbing. So if you guys log off, it's honestly, I won't get mad or anything, because this movie was really not really appropriate for children. How I managed to see this in my head when I would sleep every night, I do not know. I really don't. I don't know how I took it, but yeah, I did. So anyway, so while she's coughing up, Billy drags her back into the room. Mind you, this is a ventriloquist doll. Drags a full-grown woman back into the room, ends up taking out her tongue, and yeah, they severed tongues in this movie. That's basically the whole movie. And Jamie comes back from the thing and finally, like, learns that she is dead. And yeah, so he, at first, does not know. He just walks in and basically, like, oh, what the heck? Like, she left the teapot on, like, oh my god, yelling at her, like, because, again, he doesn't know she's dead yet. So he's just yelling at her, like, what the hell? Why are you leaving this on? And she's not responding. And then she eventually responds. Eventually responds, which was actually really not her. It was the ventriloquist who controls Billy. She ends up responding in Lisa's voice somehow, which a lot of people thought that was tripped people a lot out who actually watched this movie. So he starts to think, what the heck? Like, oh, she's in bed, cool. We're gonna do it. And, so basically, in the whole thing, he's heading over to their bedroom and starts slipping. So he's like, what the heck am I slipping on? He turns on the light in the hallway, and the whole floor is filled with blood. Not knowing what is going on, just what the hell. He drops the rose that he had in his mouth and is yelling for her, and she, weirdly, oddly enough, is responding, but again, that's not her responding, that is Mary Shaw responding, which I will talk about who she is in a bit. And so he just starts, like, what the heck is going on? And then there's some, like, lightning that goes only into the room where she was at. So he walks into the room, and, like, because he's also still following the blood, and notices the sheet where Billy originally was, like, with the stain full of blood. So he takes off the cover, and she basically sees his wife posed as a mannequin in a creepy way. And he ends up calling the police. They end up coming, taking her body, and questioning him. The cop is believing that he did it, even though he actually didn't, but because also watching a lot of crime stuff, it actually does make sense of why they assumed it was Jamie, because there was, for one, no forced entry on the apartment. So, and the only fingerprints in the house were his and basically Lisa's, but mainly his. So I could see from from like a police's perspective of why they thought it was him and thought he was going crazy trying to blame a doll, when they're like, doll can't do that. What are you talking about? A doll can't just murder somebody, which a lot of people think that, but probably a lie. I've watched a couple crazy doll things, like Annabelle, which is a whole other story, but yeah, no. So then, anyways, then they start talking about like how he just like is tripping out, and he's explaining to the detective basically why are you questioning me? I didn't do it, and all this stuff. If you want to like get answers, why don't you look at that package that I had received along with Billy in it? And the cop starts reading the statement from earlier of what Jamie had said, and it was basically that he had received the package. And so he's just like, yeah, no, like, that does not make sense. You're like, I've arrested a couple husbands, I can't arrest a doll, basically. So then basically like Jamie gets mad and leaves and tells him like, I'll do your job, like I'm gonna basically have to do your job for you. Then he goes home where the crime scene is still a mess. They didn't really clean anything up. So he is still sad, and he sees Billy on the floor because for some reason you would think in a cop thing they would take the doll if that was technically evidence, because later on they actually say he's evidence but don't end up taking him. That's what I thought was weird. But anyways, it's like I don't know. Anyways, so he ends up grabbing the doll from the room where it was laying. It was like laying on the floor, and just like if it was thrown, and he puts it back into the trunk and is looking through the trunk and realizes there was a little hole in the trunk inside had like padding and stuff, and like this weird kind of like red, like I don't know how to like thread, like not thread. Oh my god, I don't know how to explain it, but like those fabrics, like red fabrics. So he rips it, and he sees a picture of Mary Shaw and Billy that they used to do shows in. They basically used to do shows in Ravensfair, which is where Jamie is actually from. Originally, he is from there, but he got away because his dad was a very abusive man. He used to basically abuse all his wives. He actually even drove. It got to the point where Jamie's mom actually actually committed suicide because of how abusive his father was and everything. So, anyways, so he starts driving to Ravensfair again because that's where her family, Lisa's family, had chose to bury her in the town that she grew up in. Her and Jamie grew up in. So while he's there, he goes and visits his dad, but finds out that his dad had got remarried for one and had a heart attack 2 months before, and was a little upset that nobody had said anything to him. But the dad ends up explaining that he just chose not to say anything because of how Jamie just doesn't call back. He's just like, or he just doesn't answer his calls. So he just didn't see the point of it. So then he basically is just getting upset and just like, forget this. Walks out. The new stepmom is just trying to like, no, he's changed. He's not like what you remember. And Jamie's just not wanting to hear it. He ends up leaving and going back to his hotel room. And while he's there, he is just laying on the bed for a little bit, looking through his wallet, and finds a picture of Lisa and is really sad about it. So he puts it back in his wallet and then puts the wallet on the nightstand. And when he does, he decides to go to sleep, and a couple minutes into his sleep, Billy ends up like right in front of him, like literally like right here while he's sleeping, and like literally calling him. Billy's calling him, and he's just like freaks out as soon as he wakes up, because then he just like thinks he's hallucinating at first. And then because like the lights to the hotel room are like those neon sign kind of ones, so the neon thing was kind of like blinking a lot, and it's just like completely red in the room because of the neon sign. And he just sees like through like where the window was, like a figure, and it ended up being Mary Shaw. So he freaks out, turns on the light, and she was gone. So she's not there anymore, and Billy's just where he was, where he had actually left them, and in the exact same position. So he's just like, okay, what the heck? And the next day he goes to the funeral home to talk to the guy who does the funeral stuff, which is Henry Walker, which he's actually a big part of the story. So you'll hear it. Like, I'll talk about him a little more too. But so then basically I'm just gonna keep going on. So then he just goes and he goes and visits like Henry Walker, and they start talking about funeral plans and stuff. And then it jumps to where basically the funeral, and they're just right there, like it's her family only. And Jamie, he decides after they put her in the ground to basically take a walk, and Henry Walker's wife, who is, I'm not gonna say crazy, I think she has some type of medical illness. I think it's like dementia or Alzheimer's. She has like something, but they never like really clarify whether she does or doesn't. But she's just crazy with those two, because she ends up going up to Jamie in the graveyard and starts talking about how she believed Mary Shaw had killed Lisa, and that he needed to bury the doll, and he found that a little odd. So he was trying to ask her questions, but Henry Walker like stopped him because he was like, oh, she's insane. She doesn't know what she's saying, kind of thing. It's one of those like, oh, my wife doesn't know what she's saying. So then basically, so he goes, what the heck, and he decides to basically like go find her actual grave, and he actually does, and he finds 101 other little small graves around hers, and that is actually another thing I will talk about soon. So basically he's like, what the heck? He goes back to his hotel room and realizes that Billy was supposed to be in the ground. So he grabs Billy and takes him back to the graveyard at night, like literally pitch black at night, and decides to bury him again. So while he is driving there, Billy is humming and staring at him, and a lot of crazy things. So he realizes, what the heck, who dug him up? So he puts him back in, and when he does, he puts some, like, he basically just, like, I would have to show you guys, like, he just, like, his face first, so he just, like, throw him in there, and while he's about to close the casket, Billy, like, turns his, like, head around to, like, all the way, so it's, like, his back, like, his whole head is, like, facing his back, which is really creepy. But Jamie doesn't see anything by it. He just, like, closes the thing and buries it, and then goes back home. Goes back to the hotel. The next day, he goes and he tries to go and talk to people, and nobody's saying anything. And then out of nowhere, after he showered and stuff, he was walking out of the restroom of his hotel room and sees Billy sitting down on his bed. He, like, immediately, like, what the heck? And ends up finding out the cop, the detective, is in town. And it was like, well, I thought I told you not to leave and stuff. And he tells him, I'm here to bury my wife. And then he was like, why are you trying to get rid of evidence? Which, again, why I said that's weird. If Billy was evidence, why didn't they take him? I don't know. As much as I know this movie inside and out, I can't actually explain that reason. So then, anyways, they basically start, like, talking, and he starts telling him about the story about Mary Shaw, about how she was a ventriloquist in the town, like, a long time ago, how she died with a bunch of her doll collection, and she actually has a poem, which I actually have framed too, which is this, but I will read it. It's where it reads as, "Beware the stare of Mary Shaw. She had no children, only dolls. And if you see her in your dreams, be sure you never, ever scream, or she'll rip your tongue out at the seam." So everybody in that town of Ravensfair knows the rhyme, just won't say it because they are very, very terrified of Mary Shaw there, and I will explain the reason why. So basically, he starts telling the cop and stuff. So basically, yeah, he starts telling the cop, and the cop is just not wanting to believe the story at all. He's like, just like really, like you could tell on the cop's face. He's just like, oh my god, he's still dragging this story on about a ghost now killing his wife. First he blames a doll, now he's blaming a ghost. Like, come on. So then the next day, so after the conversation, the cop kind of reveals that he is also staying in town and at the same hotel. He's like right next door to Jamie. So he takes Billy with him and leaves him there. And while the cop leaves the next morning to go like talk to some of the residents about the whole legend of Mary Shaw, he leaves Billy in the motel room. So Jamie kind of sneaks in and grabs him and takes him back to Henry Walker, where Henry Walker's wife Miriam is like, what the heck? And that's when Henry Walker walks out and she's like, I didn't say anything. And then Henry starts freaking out and he's like, you're like, he's stuttering and saying you're not supposed to have that. And he's starting to say it's hers, and they basically, like the way in Harry Potter they talk about Mary Shaw, like they don't say her name. They're so terrified to say her name. Everybody in that town is afraid of her, like super, super afraid of her. Like they don't like talking about her. They like if you ask anybody else any questions, they just clam up and like, oh, that's not real. What are you talking about? Like, no. Like they just pretend like she doesn't exist, or like it was a made up tale kind of thing. But like, oh, you know how people are with rumors. Basically, like they try to do that with outsiders because they don't want outsiders to know what really happened, which I will explain that too. So anyways, so then Henry Walker starts to explain who Mary Shaw is, which is now getting to one of my favorite parts actually of the whole film, is the scene where Henry is talking about when he was a child. He went to go see one of Mary Shaw's shows, and while he was there, something happened, which I'm going to talk about. So while he was there, he sat down, and someone announced Mary Shaw like they do comedy shows, but it was like in the 1920s at that time, so they would like have actual people like come out and be like, oh, presenting her. So they presented her, and then she comes out with the trunk, opens it, and realizes Billy's not in there. And mind you, this is a flashback, so Billy was in her arms because she was alive. Well, anyways, so then basically she's like, where is Billy? And just like saying his name, like saying, where are you? Kind of thing. And then he ends up responding back, like, I'm right here. And she ends up pointing at young Henry Walker. He is like, I think, they don't actually like give his age, but I'm gonna go from like 11 to like, I'm gonna say 12. Like, he's between 10 and 12 at that age. And she points at him and goes, hey, like, can you check under your seat? So the young Henry Walker decides to check under his seat, and basically he ends up finding Billy under it. And he says, oh, he's right here. So she asks him, can you bring him to me? He grabs Billy from under the chair and takes him to the stage, hands him to Mary. So Mary Shaw's like, like Billy tell him thank you without even saying his name, like without like she didn't know his name, and then he says thank you, Henry, and she's just like impressed. She pretends to be impressed and goes, "Is that your name?" And Henry nods yes, and she's like, "Wow, I guess my boy's been keeping an eye on you." So he ends up walking away and goes back to his seat. And so in that timing, they start the show, and they're just like, "Why?" She's telling him, "Why did you run away?" And he's like, "Oh, don't I treat you well?" And he's like, "No, yes, you do. You're like one of the best moms ever," kind of thing. And then while they're having their little show, a, another child decides to scream out that they aren't good. He basically says, "You guys suck." Throughout the whole thing, he's just like telling her, "Oh, I can see your lips moving," and she just like the whole show ends up stopping, and she's just like, "Who is that? Like, who said that?" And the kid, which was the same age as Henry Walker, his name was Michael Ashton, and he's actually very important to the story too. So, yeah, but you'll understand why. So Michael Ashton ends up saying, "I did," and he's like, "I could see it, like your lips are moving," and she starts telling Billy, "What do you think about that? Like about him thinking that," and saying how haters are gonna hate basically. But she says they're all Bobby's daughters, and Billy had a different reaction towards it. He was really mad that the kid did that. He was like, "What the heck? Like, no, you're not gonna say that. Like, bring him up here. I want to prove it to him." Like, getting riled up, and at the same time, while him and Mary Shaw are just basically arguing with each other, going back and forth at the same time, and they're just like really impressed because of how back and forth. Like, they're both talking at the same time, but because this is a film and Billy was voiced by somebody else and not her, like, it's not that impressive. Like, it wouldn't be that impressive to you guys, but like if you seen like someone like just Jeff Dunham, like, and him and Peanut were doing that would be really impressive. But anyways, so they prove it, and then she stares out into the audience more where Michael Ashton was sitting, and says, "Now, who's the dummy?" Then it goes back to now, like the present, where Henry is still explaining to Jamie about like what was going on. He starts saying how Michael Ashton had went missing around like a couple of weeks after that show, and they had believed that Mary Shaw had did it. That Mary Shaw was responsible for his for his disappearance. Because, not gonna lie, I'm gonna spoil it, she was. Anyways, so they ended up dealing with her. The entire town at that age, around that year of the 1920s, they ended up like breaking into her house and ended up basically murdering her by making her scream and basically cutting out her tongue. So she ended up dying and ended up at the funeral home where at that time, Henry's father owned it because he was alive. So Henry was like super, like kind of curious. Of course, like all kids, decides, "I'm gonna go see her body," and goes to see it. But her ghost ends up tipping over where she was on the table she was on. So while he was on it, trying to look at her, and she ended up falling on him a little bit, and he freaks out and moves. And while he's moving, she gets up and decides to like go up towards him. But luckily, Henry's dad ended up like walking in and turning on the light, and they just see her body right there, like she fell, kind of thing. Like she pretended like she just fell, and then Henry starts explaining, while showing pictures of how after she died, many family members of Ravensfair were being murdered exactly the way she was. being like, they would scream, they would get their tongues out. But there was one thing that they did, that she did differently than what her murderers did. She actually started posing people like if mannequins in family portraits. Like, she would sit them all down on, like, chairs. Like, she would get chairs. Like, this is so crazy to me. Like, how they wanted people to believe that the ghost sat chairs down and basically, like, had them all right there and took pictures. It was so crazy how they did that. And so, basically, while he's showing Jamie the pictures, Jamie comes across the ones he took, that Henry had took of Lisa, and he was like super angry about that. And Henry basically explained like he had to take those pictures, like they always have to, because it's a funeral home, like they have to, it's for their business. And so when Jamie hears where Mary Shaw had lived, which was actually that theater, which was the theater that they had where she did her shows. She actually lived above the theater, which is the Grand Ole Theater. That was that one. So Jamie decides to go. At first, Henry tries to stop him, but Jamie's just like, no, I need to know if she's the reason why my wife is dead. So Henry just tells him, alright, but so you know, if you go looking for answers, you just might find them. So Jamie's just like, that's what I hope. So he decides to go to he decides to go to the theater, which is like closed down at this point because everything in that town is closed down. Like, there's not really many residents left. A lot of them either left or were murdered or died just in general. So they basically, like, it's like everything, like all the general stores, like a lot of the businesses, like when Jamie came, like was driving through the town, were all closed. A lot of stuff. So anyways, but the theater had been closed for years though. So he had to take a boat basically out there because the bridge to it was destroyed in time. And basically, so with some of the theater, like it was really like one of those very old and abandoned theaters. So he goes to the top of the theater where Mary Shaw had lived. And again, that because it was so abandoned and not a lot of people, I believe, nobody really knew what was up there. Or like I think they did, but at the same time they just didn't want to go up there. So all her stuff was there besides the dolls because, again, they were buried with her. And basically he just starts looking around and realizing that, oh my god, he starts going through stuff, and she's like, okay. So he's like, towards the end of looking, he decides to go to his dad's house, and it's like, because he sees in her pictures, like, she ended up having this, like, photo, like, book, like those, like, scrapbooks kind of thing, and realizes that the boy, Michael Ashton, who went missing, had the same last name as him, because Jamie's last name was Ashton. So he just thought, oh, that's a coincidence, didn't really at first think he was related to him. And then he goes and talks to his dad, and he tells him, like, okay, like, what does Mary Shaw and Michael Ashton have to do with us? So then Jamie gets more information from his dad, that when Michael Ashton was a boy, he had vanished without a trace, and that the whole Ashton family, like men, mainly men and other men from the town, had went to go murder her. And then that's when they realized that Mary Shaw had cursed the town, like after she died, like because she had unfinished business to do. And he starts saying how he's gonna come, like how she's gonna come for them. And Jamie was more mad about the fact that there was something that the dad had said, which was that that's why he had sent Jamie away a lot. Like, he would actually send Jamie to, like, private schools, like, boarding schools and stuff, other places that weren't Ravensfair, and to protect him, to supposedly distance him from the curse. But realizing that they can't run from it because of how the curse found Lisa many hours away. Like, they lived hours away from Ravensfair. They got away from the town completely until they actually really didn't. So then, basically, he just like, you know, whatever. He starts walking away, and he like runs out. And while he's walking out, the cop that is investigating his wife's murder walks in and starts telling him how he is going to arrest him for one for the murder of his wife, and two for stealing evidence in the crime, which was Billy. Like, they considered him stealing Billy was evidence. And while they're like kind of arguing and stuff, Jamie's stepmom goes, "Is everything alright?" She just randomly appears and just like, what the heck is going on? And she just starts, they just like pretend like nothing's happening, and she tells Jamie that somebody's on the phone with him. And while he gets on the phone, and it's Henry, which actually I forgot about this part. Well, I almost forgot. Oh my god, how did I forget about this part? So actually, back up a little bit. While Jamie was searching through the theater, Henry was just right there, like, doing what he had to do in a funeral home. And Billy was just basically next, sitting in front of a casket, like an empty one. And he just starts hearing voices. And Miriam is one of them. And Miriam's like telling Mary Shaw how she didn't say anything to Jamie, like she didn't snitch them out and stuff. And then like when Henry walks into the room, Mary Shaw and Billy just stay quiet. They just were like, oh, look, she's crazy, kind of thing. So Henry gets mad and ends up grabbing Billy, and Miriam's trying to explain to him that he talked, and he's just like, stop it, you're going delusional, kind of thing. Stop it, like, you need to stop these delusions. So he's like, so he grabs Billy, takes him back to his workshop so he can find a shovel and other things so he can go bury Billy again. So basically that's when when Henry called, and, wait, sorry, that was actually the end of the scene. So while he's getting this stuff, he has this little, like, kind of little underground thing in there that Miriam usually likes to go to. But Miriam wasn't in there this time, and she was hearing crying. So he was hearing crying. And so when he was hearing it, he thought it was Miriam, oh, she was crying because he yelled at her. So he decides to go in there into the little hole that's like kind of like a way that leads under the house, I think. So he goes under there, and basically he doesn't see her in there, and the door just slowly closes. Billy, however, is still sitting where he had placed him. So Billy didn't do this one. And he eventually okay, she's not in here. But sees that the door closed. The lower door closed. And is basically like, oh my god, freaking out that it's open. And like any that it's closed. So he's like screaming his wife, and he's like, open the door. And then while he's screaming, Billy says, hello, Henry. And it is the most creepiest thing ever. Like, to some people, like, to me, I love this movie. I can watch this movie at 2 o'clock in the morning. Anyways. But yeah, so a lot of people thought that was creepy, and he trips out. He's just like, holy, like, damn, like, oh my god. Like, damn, I'm in trouble. Sorry, guys. So, he's just like, oh my god, I'm in trouble. And he's trying to, like, get away. And then he ends up being face to face with Mary Shaw, and she ends up, like, killing him because he ends up screaming. So he's like, what the heck? Oh my god. So he ends up screaming and ends up sadly dying. So, yeah, back to the phone call. So, Mary Shaw is the one who called. And basically, he's like, what the heck? Like, he can't hear Henry because it was very staticky. Like, this was played off very well. Like, it was staticky. Like, it's like if they were losing connection. So Jamie ends up hanging up the phone and starts telling the detective how he was gonna leave to the theater again, but also before he starts saying anything about it going, the detective actually tells Jamie that the other 101 dolls that Mary Shaw had were also missing. They were also dug up. So, who had that much time? I don't know. Actually, I do know, but yeah. But anyways, so, because I know this whole movie, like, literally, I can say any line to this movie. I know every scene very well from how much it was played in my head as a child. Anyways, so that's when Jamie just, like, does not care. He pushes the cop out of the way and runs into his car, so the cop decides to chase him. He's just like, damn it, I don't have gas. And Jamie heads back to the theater where he believes Henry is at, when in reality, Henry's dead. And he goes back upstairs, like, he goes back to where Mary's at, and he's just yelling Henry's name like crazy. And the detective ends up at the same time, like, following him, like, exactly from the boat ride to that. And he also has the shotgun with him, the detective. So then basically he starts telling him, like they're both going back and forth about how Henry's here or not there. Like, and then while they're arguing, Henry says, yes, I am. And when, like, the cop is just like, I don't want to hear, I told you so. You say it, I will shoot you. So they start following the voice of Henry into Mary Shaw's room, and they don't see anything. And then eventually Jamie finds something he didn't find before, and that was another back room. There was a secret back room, because the room wasn't, like, visual, like, there was no door to it. It was more of a, like, it was like a wall, and then, like, you just had to go through it like that. So he ended up seeing it then, when the detective was with him, and he tells him, remember, whatever happens, do not scream. So he doesn't scream, so he just starts following Jamie, and he was just like, oh my god. He starts seeing, again, there's nothing, Henry's not there, Mary Shaw's not there, and then, so they're just, like, looking around, and the detective sees the doll on the floor and goes, oh my god, if I have to see another one of these, I will shoot my own self, kind of thing. And then he throws the doll at one of the walls that had a sheet, and when he threw it, ended up dropping the sheet and that's when they discovered that all the dolls, besides Billy, was there. All 100 of them. And they were like, oh, like, who the hell could have brought them there and stuff. Then while they're looking at the dolls, they just hear like this very like squeaking sound like of a rocking chair going back and forth, and they see something in the chair, and they're not wanting, like the detective's not wanting to believe that it's Mary Shaw. He really just does not want to believe it, and Jamie already knew it was her, and starts saying Mary Shaw. Then, as soon as he says the name, the rocking chair just stops. Just completely stops. And basically, she just says, clever. And the cop's still not, like, believing any of this. He's really just, like, he's really in denial at this point. Like, he's just, like, super, like, no, this is not believable. I am not seeing this, like, we're hallucinating kind of thing. So, like, Jamie's just like, what do you want? And she starts telling him about how she was trying to construct the perfect doll and all this stuff and why. And then he asks her, why did she take Lisa from him? And she tells him to get closer. When he does, she ends up whispering to him something that he actually didn't know, because Lisa never had the chance to actually tell him. She was actually pregnant. I don't know how far along she was, but I don't think she was that far along. She wasn't really showing it. So, like, I think she was a couple weeks. And, yeah, so she was pregnant. He did not know. And she wanted every last Ashton to die. And she knew Jamie's child was the last one. Would have been. So she was trying to end the Ashton line by murdering Lisa. So after she does that, she ends up with her very long tongues, because after when she would kill people and rip out their tongues, she would keep it, and she had it was very disgusting long tongue. So she licked his face and starts evilly laughing and grabs the doll, like the creepy doll, because it's like a really creepy clown doll. So it's like, yeah, it's really creepy looking. And basically he just is like, oh my god, ill. And she just like picks up, and that's when the cop like realizes, like, oh my god, this is real. Like, oh my god. So he starts to begin to shoot her, but of course, because she's a ghost, she just comes back. So they started noticing that she was possessing the dolls. So Jamie starts telling him to shoot the dolls, and he does, the detective does, but because there are so many of them that she can just attack them, they had a lantern with them, like one of those regular, like, old lanterns, and he throws it at the wall with the dolls, so she ends up, like, kind of dying again, like her ghost ends up dying, but not really. So then it just more like kind of hurt her. So then that's when everything became on fire and stuff, and they're trying to get away. They fall. They're running out of the theater, and the detective does fall off the ledge that they were trying to run from, because it was like one of those catwalks. So if you know how high a catwalk is, either way, the man was dead. Like, if Mary Shaw didn't kill him, that was, which she did. So then Jamie gets out, and while he's trying to actually get up from the catwalk, because it kind of turned, so that's why when it made the detective fall and die. And Jamie did fall too, because Mary Shaw kind of just like, hey buddy, and he just like, oh my god. So he let go and tried not screaming, which he didn't, because he ended up covering his mouth, so he didn't scream, and ended up in the water and swam to the shore and realized that, like, while the the theater was burning that there was one missing. So he decides to go to Henry's house to go destroy Billy. But to his recollection, to his knowledge, no, his own, oh my god, I'm sorry, unknown knowledge, Billy was taken. So Mariel is right there with Henry's body where he was found, which is outside of the little door where he had died. And she's just crying, and Jamie's trying to get her to explain who took the doll. And she's crying Mr. Ashton, which is his father. And Jamie is confused by it because if you watch this movie, which is something I did not explain, Jamie's dad is on oxygen, like kind of like this, and he's in a wheelchair. So he is in a wheelchair, so he can't move. And he's just like, Miriam, my dad's in a wheelchair. There's no way he could have took it. And she's trying to convince him. She's just like, he took the doll, he had it, he left with it. So he decides to go to his dad's house. And when he does, he discovers Billy in one of those bassinet things for babies. He realizes Billy is there, and when he's trying to grab Billy, Mary Shaw appears out of nowhere trying to attack him. He falls with Billy's in his hand close to a fireplace and basically destroys, like throws Billy into the fire and destroys Mary Shaw from what he thought. Well, then out of nowhere, he realizes that his dad, so he finds his dad, afterwards, and he realizes something that he did not know. There's a lot of twists and turns about this movie that a lot of people don't know about, and I think this part would be the most disturbing part to people, because when Jamie found his dad was just sitting there, not moving at all, not moving a muscle, if he was dead or something, which actually he is dead. Jamie just did not know it. So basically, he goes and realizes, so he's like, Dad, are you okay? And when the dad, goes forward, he sees that the back of his dad is, open, you can see his organs and stuff, and that there was basically a wooden stick to control him. So he was the perfect doll that Mary Shaw wanted. And then he turned around, and you can still hear Mary Shaw's voice. And when he actually does turn around, Ella, his stepmom, is right behind him, and she apparently was working with Mary Shaw, and Mary Shaw basically was possessing her, and Mary Shaw ended up killing Jamie, and that's how the film ends. Now, you're probably thinking, why did she work with him? Why did she work with Mary Shaw? Why was she trying to do all this? Well, while Jamie's dad was alive, this is in the deleted scenes, because I have the DVD, so I know. But you can always look them up too. In one of the deleted scenes, the gardener to the dad's place, because the dad is very rich, so he has this mansion kind of house, one of those houses with a bunch of bedrooms. And in the film, and in the deleted scenes, he starts explaining how it was before. The dad would yell, scream, and hit her, and one day he went too far and they found out that she had been pregnant. Ella had been pregnant by Jamie's dad, and she wanted the baby so badly, but because he was very abusive, he actually slapped her so hard she fell down a bunch of stairs. And when she did, they of course took her to the hospital, and she discovered that she had lost the baby. So when Edward, there's no really detail on how he died. They say it was a heart attack. So let's just stick with that. Yeah, he had a heart attack, and because he was so old, he couldn't handle it. So his body couldn't handle it. So he ended up dying, and she ended up somehow oh my god, I can't say the word. Somehow, like, keeping his body, or it was preserved. There it goes. She ended up preserving the body as the way it is, and kept him as a puppet. And she was the one who, you find out in the deleted scenes and stuff, that she was the one who dug up Billy. She's the one who sent it to Jamie. She's the one who was doing all the stuff and realizing, like, she was working with the ghost of Mary Shaw, basically, because of how she felt cheated out of having a child, just like Mary Shaw. But I don't know if she ever had, Mary Shaw had maternal problems. I know she was never married. So basically, that is actually it of the movie. You guys can always watch it. It's a Universal film. It's called Dead Silence. It might not be to everybody's liking, which that's fine. Like, even to me, I know a lot of people ask me, how do I watch this film? Honestly, I think it's just because I'm so used to it. Like I said, I watched this movie since I was 4 in my head. This was like, that whole movie was played in my head, in my dreams, from the time I was 4 till I was about 12 years old on this day. The year that 14 years ago is actually the day my dreams stopped too. So that is why I actually wanted to do this live, because of that reason. When I was 4, they started, and then the day the movie came out in 2007 is the day my dreams stopped. And honestly, I didn't even know about the film. I didn't know about the film at all. Like, I had never heard of the film until I was in high school. But I know about the film now, and I'm not gonna lie, it trips me out that I went through that. But I keep it as something that I went through and I'm getting through. And there's this one line that I always think of when people tell me, where do you get your strength? Especially when it came to this whole thing. I think of this one line that Neve Campbell and Ted said in Scream 4 when she was doing a book tour. Her character, Sidney Prescott, was doing a book tour, and she was reading from this book that she had wrote, and it's called Outer Darkness. And she says, this is the quote that I like to say a lot. I believed myself to be a victim, and that was unacceptable to me. So I sat down and began to write a new role for a woman who could leave the wall of fears behind and step out into the sunlight. And she just says the book's name. So I think that really helps me a lot. Thinking like, okay, I went through this. A lot of people go through stuff. So I think you just need to learn how to handle it. It might take a while, but it's okay. But anyways, my throat is starting to, you can hear it in my voice. I'm starting to lose my voice, so I'm going to get off. Bye guys.